Hello.
Hello. I'm gonna take my mask.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
All right. So we're going to tell the story of how we met. But I'm gonna start before.
okay.
So
Before.
we're gonna. Well, actually, you should start because you were a part of the story before I was a part of the story. So
Well, I didn't know that.
no. I mean, let's start at your mother meeting our father. Let's start there because that's like the very beginning, right?
Okay. All right. Well, my mother was. My mother is Polish, and
Sorry.
she was a refugee in the Second World War when the Russians invaded and took their homes. So everyone was put on a train and just headed out to who knows where. She happened to end up in East Africa with her mother and her siblings.
And can you tell a year at that point?
I can't tell a year. It was towards the end of the war, and they were put in a
1945, maybe.
well, probably a little bit later.
Okay.
And they were put into a camp for refugees in Tanganyika, as it was then, now Tanzania. And in fact, it's in Tanya's story here.
Right.
All right. So, where is it? we should have prepared, folks. And Tanya has written it all up.
I thought I had it there.
You did, but then you buried it.
I buried it?
Yeah.
Buried
Yeah,
it?
you buried it.
Does she have a year in there?
I don't believe so. So she... well, see, we might have to go for take two.
Well, okay, so we're at the point where it's around 1945, and your mother is where? Where again?
It's in a camp
Camp?
in
Africa?
East Africa.
East Africa,
in
okay.
Tanzania.
And at this point, my mother is about 6 years old, growing up in, I think she was in Minnesota. I actually have to ask her that. I don't know.
Okay.
So there we have it. And your mom is how old at this point?
She's probably around 16, 17,
16.
something like that.
Okay.
So they ended up in this refugee camp. It's called Tengeru, Tengeru. So a lot of Polish people were there, and so she was there with her mother and siblings, etc. And at one point then, this person who turned out to be our dad
Okay.
was trying to romance, if that's the right word, my mother's elder sister, Helen.
Oh.
But she'd already met someone, I believe,
Okay.
so that didn't go anywhere.
And he was about how old at that point?
He was born, I think, in 1923, so he would have been 24 or something like
Okay.
that. Okay.
And your mother was 16?
Well, she was probably a little bit older by now, maybe 17,
Oh.
yeah, something like that.
Right.
17. So he then turned his attention to my mother and promised her, this is what I'm told, okay? Promised her that he would look after her and the rest of her family, which was my grandmother, my mother's two younger brothers, Adam and Jacob.
Okay.
Okay, that he would, if she married him, so that he would give them a home and take care of all of them. So
Right.
she married him in August 1948, and so she would have been 17, not
Yeah.
yet turned 18. And I was born in May 1949.
Oh.
So,
Was she 18 at that point?
She was then 18.
Okay.
Yeah. What?
Just legal.
Different times, you know. So I was born in May, and now again, from what I'm led to believe, he didn't really look after them, and you know, it all fell apart. So she left him and ultimately divorced him. So I really didn't know him. My only memory of him is once where we lived in Nairobi. I was maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4, and my grandmother and my mother were shouting through the door. It didn't have glass in it, it just had a sort of wire mesh at somebody on the other side, and that somebody on the other side was shouting back. And I'm hopping about there saying, who is it, who is it? And eventually my mother lifted me up and said, that's your father. Not having known a father, I didn't know what a father was really. And
How old were you at that point?
Very young, 4 maybe. So I
And
didn't.
this was in Africa still?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
In Nairobi now,
Okay.
which is where they moved to.
And then at what year did you go back to London or England?
Well, that's way ahead, yeah.
Oh, so you're still in Africa at this
We're
point?
still in Africa,
Okay.
and this is probably about 1953, something like that.
Okay.
So I don't remember ever seeing him again after that. I may have done, but I don't remember it. Other than when I was around 11, probably, maybe 12,
Still in Africa?
in Africa. He took my mother to court, and I now believe that was to have custody of me. So that would have been about 1960, 61, something like that. But you know, and so I saw him then. So the judge asked me who I wanted to be with. I didn't know him. So I said my mother, so I stayed with my mother, and that same day I remember him saying then, look, I'm going to buy you a present. So we walked around Nairobi, and I was just beginning to get an interest in music, and I saw a record player and I asked for that. And he said, okay, I'll buy it for you, I'll get it to you. Now, I never saw the record player, and I never saw him again after that.
And that was what year?
Well, it's probably about 61, 60, 61, something like that.
And you were how old?
11, 12,
11, okay.
12 maybe, I don't know.
So at the same time, about 61,
Yeah.
I think my mom started going to Europe
Yeah,
to work
yeah,
around that same time period.
yeah.
And then from Europe, she went to Africa. So I'm not sure what year she went to Africa.
Right.
So what year did you go to London?
Well, we left there in June 1963.
3, okay.
We went to England, my mother and I.
And did you and my mom talk about if you were there at the same time?
Well,
In Africa?
yeah, she
Was
knew.
there an overlap?
She knew of me.
Mm.
She says that my dad had a photograph of me, which she saw.
Mm.
So yeah, she knew about me.
But I mean, were you in Africa at the same
Yes.
time?
Yes.
You were?
Yes, for a year or 2.
Oh,
So
wow.
you know, she was there. She met him, and
But you didn't
knew of me.
see each
No.
other?
No.
Huh.
And I didn't know about him. I didn't know about your mum. And ultimately, when Debbie and you were born, I never knew about you. So in
Right,
1963, my mother and I came to England,
Okay,
and that's where we were.
okay. And my mother, she was in Nairobi, Kenya. She met our father. She got pregnant with our sister, and they lived there. And then she got pregnant with me. And then she found out that I was a girl and had a fight with our father because he wanted a boy. And so she left, and she went to Portland, Oregon. And so now we're at 1967, and I was born in Portland, Oregon. And I didn't know about John until our father died.
In 78.
78, January 8th, 1978. And we got a phone call from Nairobi, Kenya. And then probably either months later or years later, I don't know, at some point they sent a letter saying that
Who's they?
I don't know that either. Someone, the lawyers, someone sent a letter saying, and I don't think we even have the letter. I don't know if we have the letter still. Saying that our father's estate was going to his son. And then I started knowing that I have a brother. That was the first time. And at this point, you're growing up in Reading,
Yeah.
and you don't have any knowledge of any of this.
Well, we had a call from my mother's brother, my uncle Jacob, saying that my father had died and that his solicitors or somebody was looking for me.
Okay.
So my mother then said to him, well, just tell him where we are. It's no secret.
Right.
So he did. But that's the last I ever heard of it. I never heard any more until eventually, many years later, I met you and Debbie.
Oh, we're not there yet.
No, but just... So
at this point, you just get a phone call and
yeah, okay.
you're okay. So then, so I found out that I have a brother. So I start contacting, as I get older and older, I start contacting all my our father's relatives to ask who my brother is, where he is, how can I find them. I find out from, I think, Rashida, that my brother is in London, or I think that's what she said. He's in England or London or something like that. And so then I figure out in my little brain, I was a teenager at the time, that I could go to a college and find a college that had an overseas program to Europe, and then I could find a way to take a train to England and walk around. I didn't think that England was that big of a place, so I figured I would just walk around and ask, where's my brother? So that was my whole plan.
Okay.
So
That
then
worked.
it worked, yeah. And so then I applied to Lewis and Clark College. I got to the college and I applied to they had a overseas program to Hungary. That was as close as I could get to England. And then I lived in Hungary for 6 months, gained 50 pounds on bread and cheese. That's the only thing I wanted to eat there. And then I took the train from Hungary to Paris, and I got all my traveler's checks stolen by somebody in a youth hostel. Did I ever tell you that?
No.
No, I never did. And so I got all scared. I was gonna walk around Paris for a little bit and look at the Eiffel Tower or whatever. But then I got my traveler's checks stolen, so I said, to heck with this. I'm gonna just go straight to England where I have family, and they're gonna protect me from all these bad people. So, so I went from Paris to London. I stayed with our father's friends, the Dodias, for the month of February, and I contacted all of the relatives that I could find in England.
And this was what, yeah?
1988.
88.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
fast forwarded. So should we say anything about your life between
Not really.
1978 to 88?
Got married, had children. nothing of major interest in terms of our family.
Okay. So then, 1988, February, I go around to all of the relatives I could find and say, hey, I'm looking for my brother. I'm desperate to find him. Please help me. Do you know of anyone I could talk to? Here's my phone number in the States. Because there were no cell phones back then.
No.
There was no email. There was no Facebook. There was no WhatsApp.
Would have made it a lot easier.
Yeah. We had a cell phone. Something. No.
I wasn't in the phone book though.
You were in the phone book? I could have just looked at the phone book.
For Reading. How'd you know I was in Reading?
So I went everywhere I could, think of, and I said, I'm looking for my brother, please help me find my brother. And then no one really knew anything, but they took my phone number, and they said, oh yeah, sure, we'll call you. I didn't have a whole lot of hope.
Right.
I was pretty depressed. And I went back to Portland, Oregon in March 1988.
Okay.
And should we stop there?
Well, no.
Because then you tell your part.
Well, only the same year then, my cousin Chef, who was living in Africa, got in touch with a lady called Goody, who I think is Fuzzle's daughter.
Oh.
And she lived in Leicester, I believe, up in the Midlands of England.
Okay.
And he mentioned me, and he'd been to visit me in Reading. And she said, John's got family living in Slough, which is 20 minutes away from Reading.
Oh.
So.
Who was the family?
Well, it was, I think Rashida was there.
Oh, right.
And Tanzila, who you met, haven't you, and her mum.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I had just seen them.
You had just seen them, and so I got in touch with them, and they said, you've just missed your sisters.
Do you remember what day this was? Or?
No.
Oh, okay.
But it was 1988. So they said.
It was in March too, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Okay.
But they said, you've just missed your sisters who've gone back to America.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what sisters are they? Because I never knew you existed. So I visited them, they told me about you, and that you existed. And
surprise!
From there, yeah, it was a big surprise.
You have sisters!
And from there, I guess they must have given me your details or you my details, but we got in touch.
No, I didn't
Somehow.
have your details. You
Maybe,
got my phone number.
Maybe that was
and
it
then right when I got back home,
yeah,
during my spring break, because I was still at home, I was all alone in the house, the phone rings.
That was what, in the summer then of 88?
No, it was spring break. My spring break.
Oh, okay.
And I answered the phone, and you're on the other end saying, I heard you were looking for me.
Oh.
I'm like, yeah, duh.
Okay.
I was looking for you. And then we had this long conversation about how, oh yeah, I talked to someone and they said you were here, and I was like, yeah, duh. And I didn't say duh though. So then we exchanged addresses, and there was no email or Facebook or anything else, so we started writing each other, handwriting each other. And I don't know where I put all your letters.
No, I don't remember that at all, but and you've saved everything else. Not my
I must have a envelope of your letters somewhere.
You have to find them.
Either that or I lost them all. I lost all my property in 2001, so I may have lost them all.
Okay.
So then, let's see. Okay, so we hand wrote each other letters, and then eventually we emailed each other. And then eventually we Facebooked each other. And then in 2012, October 2012, our sister and I went to London, met Lisa, didn't meet Tanya because she was at uni. I'm getting the language right.
Yeah.
And toured around.
Yeah.
For how long were we there? Like a week, I think.
No, 4 days.
Oh, 4 days, really?
Very short visit.
Very quick.
Yeah.
I didn't get to know you that well.
Well, no,
It was only 4 days.
you didn't talk to me at all. You were just staring at me.
And then.
Well, we did. I mean, we got on very well, didn't we?
Yeah, of course. We always do.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And I felt that we'd known each other all our lives.
Really?
Yes.
You never told me that.
Well, I'm telling you now. So
Tanya's the witness.
I did tell you. I felt that, we were so comfortable with each other and it was so natural.
And you and Debbie too.
Yeah, absolutely, all of us.
It's like as soon as you guys met, you were like, oh, of course, we've known each other all our lives.
Yeah. So, yes, so we obviously in 4 days we didn't do much, but you met my daughter Lisa and
right. And
Phoebe. So Phoebe, who was about 18 months old at the time.
Oh yeah, she was still a baby.
17, 18 months, yeah. And of course...
and she was pregnant then? Lisa was pregnant?
She was pregnant with Zachary, yes.
Okay, yeah.
So he was born the following April.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So that was it really, and then we continued, you went back.
I begged John, and I pleaded with him, please John, come and meet my children, come and meet Debbie's children,
yeah.
Come and meet my mother, come and see everything that we have at the house about our family, and you're going to get all kinds of information that you've been wanting to get your whole life.
And here it is on the table.
We want to meet Tanya. We've never met Tanya.
She's standing over there.
Yeah, can you come over here? Because that would complete the whole story. It's like it'll come full circle.
Yeah, so come and stand in here and say hello.
Yeah, there's Tanya.
So, yes, and I had started a business around that time and it was very busy and I was building it.
I remember that.
And I really couldn't afford time to get away from that.
Right.
Because it was just all consuming.
Mm.
So,
Sounds exhausting.
I wanted to come over as much as you wanted me to come over. But this year I sold the business.
Finally retired.
And retired at the end of February.
Retirement.
And booked the tickets to come here a few days later. And
with
here
Tanya.
we are. With Tanya, because you hadn't met her.
Yep.
So here we are in July 2018.
2018.
And we've come over for 2 weeks, Tanya and I.
Met everybody.
We've met everyone,
So
and it's been
Daniel, Michael,
delight.
Gabby, Sam, Max, Reese, and my mother.
Yeah.
And
Pat.
What?
I find that funny.
Well, I mean, he's not family.
No,
so.
but he's his partner.
Yeah.
And Chris.
Yeah, Chris.
What? Anyway, so that's it. We've.
And now you're gonna look at my paintings.
We're going to look at painting,
and
books, and whatever else. So
everything else.
Yeah.
And what has been the best part
of this trip?
Of the whole experience of having two sisters?
Well, I can't think of any. How can you say it? You can't choose one thing. It was such a surprise to find out that you existed. When I was already in, nearly 40.
Right. Because before that you didn't have any siblings, right?
No.
No siblings?
No. So I had not a clue. And
you thought you were the only child?
Yeah. Oh, and I found out, of course, when we met about this whole inheritance thing and what
Right.
you know, that somebody had made
Yeah.
off with everything.
Yeah.
So you kind of got your bit, didn't you?
I got like 3,000 maybe.
I didn't get a thing. I never heard
Right.
again. I wasn't disappointed because I didn't know him. There was
Right.
nothing. I wasn't expecting anything.
Yeah.
My mother told me that, I don't know how she knew this, but she thought that our dad believed that she'd take me back to Poland,
Oh.
not England.
Oh,
Now,
I never knew
actually,
that.
we ought to cover this. This is bizarre.
Okay.
Okay, because after he died, when you guys came over, we met the family in Slough. We went to that wedding. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And I discovered that actually our dad brought his mother over to Reading,
Right.
and she lived in Reading, about 2 to 3 miles from where I lived.
Wow. Your grandma.
Yeah, his mother.
Right.
Right.
Our grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So you could have known your grandma.
I could have known her, and maybe
Mhm.
him, because he
Yeah.
would have visited.
Wow.
I could have passed him in the street for all I know.
Wow.
So where we lived in Woodley, and where she lived in sort of West Reading, as I say, you can get there in 10 minutes,
Wow.
if that, probably
But you
less.
just didn't know that each
Didn't
other
know.
were there.
So when you came over and we met other family, I then went to the house where she'd lived, and there were some relatives there. I knocked on the door. Do you remember we went there? You and Debbie and I.
Kind of.
And when I knocked on the door, the lady answered it, said, "Oh, I know who you are."
Ah!
I said, "How do you know?" She said, "Well, you look just like your father."
Ah!
And we went in,
Wow.
we spent not long there, it was some not very pleasant experience, as I recall.
Yeah, I think I remember.
So, you know,
Wow.
and since then,
Wow.
I mean, you know, our grandmother's died, but I found
Yeah.
her, you know, where she's buried.
Gravestone.
Yeah, and I went
Wow.
out there, and I've got some pictures of a gravestone and me beside
Right.
the gravestone.
Wow.
So, you know, but that was bizarre because, you know, they've come over from Africa
Wow.
and planted themselves just down the road.
Wow. That just blows your mind, doesn't it?
Yeah. And then we had all the other family in Slough, which we met, and that was, I'd say, about 20 minutes, 25 minutes away from where I lived.
Wow.
Anyway, so I think that's brought us up to date, isn't it?
Yes. Is there anything else you want to say about family or?
Well, you know, it has been such a delight to meet everyone.
'Cause you have all of these more relatives that
Yeah.
you never had,
No.
and
So,
your children have all these more relatives
Yeah.
that they never had.
yeah. So all the cousins that Tanya and Lisa and Adam have now got, and hopefully they will all meet someday. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, Tanya's met everyone, but
Right.
obviously Lisa hasn't.
Right.
Whether Adam ever will, I don't know. But you know.
And now you see the similarities between Daniel and Adam.
There are similarities there, and the way their
I
brains
think they
work
look alike.
and their interests as well.
Right, yeah.
Adam's got this whole thing about, you know, the universe and
Really?
oh, absolutely. He does.
Wow.
And politics, and also, you know, he does a lot of thinking.
Uh-huh.
He's written.
See, I didn't even know
some
that
books.
Daniel had, you know, a relative that was like him.
Yeah.
It's like, we're like finding out all these things.
So yeah, there are some kind of similarities there.
Wow.
So that's it.
And I think Tanya and Gabby are a lot alike.
Do you?
And Lisa and Debbie are a lot alike, I think.
Do you?
Yeah.
Well, you only met Lisa once, didn't you?
Yeah.
Very briefly, anyway. But you know, hopefully, in the not too distant future, more of us can get together.
Right.
Lisa and the children, with a bit of luck.
Yeah.
She's going through an awful divorce at the moment, which has been going
Right.
on for 2.5 years. But when that's resolved, and maybe in a year or two, we can all get
Yeah.
together. And for you, what's been the
Having a brother?
yeah?
Honestly, I had this fantasy, you know, my whole life. I mean, because I didn't have a father growing up.
No.
And so I had a fantasy about my father, you know, coming in and rescuing me and making everything better and being this like knight in shining armor, you know. And then he died, and for a while I had a fantasy about how he came back and said, "Oh, that was my twin brother that died. It wasn't me." You know, it was false news. It was a twin. For a while I did. But then I started like slowly going out of that, and then it got replaced by my big brother fantasy. that I had this big brother that was gonna like, you know, sweep in a knight in shining armor and a white horse, and he was gonna like, okay, you're rescued, and you know, I'm here to protect you and save you, and you know, I don't know. I had all kinds of fantasies about what it would be like, because I always wanted a big brother. That was, you know, like every movie that you ever see or every TV show that you ever watch, the big brother is always the, you know, one that protects everybody and saves everybody and like, you know, comes to the rescue and and I was so excited having a big brother, and then I met you.
Big disappointment.
No, and no.
He doesn't have a horse.
Where's his sword? No, because you look so much like, you know, the way our dad looks, so it was kind of like it made me feel like complete, you know. It's like, because there was like this missing part of me all the time before that, and I felt like, you know, if I had only had a dad, and when I met you finally, it was like, oh, you know, kind of like all the pieces kind of fell together, and I started understanding, you know, everything that I was thinking and what was reality, what was fantasy, what, you know, I started like putting it all together, and it really like, I mean, I know it was only 4 days that we were in London, but it like really changed me, like really like made me grow up and made me like, you know, come to this like place in my thinking that was like more an adult, you know, and so I kind of like shed all that childhood fantasy stuff, and I started like, okay, this is really, you know, my dad was human, and my brother is human, and, you know, people are just human, and, you know, there is no, like, you know, superhuman whatever out there. So it totally transformed my life. Yeah. And it's been probably the best, I would say, I mean, okay, you always have to put your kids first, but one of the best things that's ever happened in my life, and I am so incredibly grateful that I had that opportunity to go to Europe when I did.
And it's through you, really.
It's all because of me.
Yeah. We can blame you.
I take all the credit or the blame. It's okay. But yeah, I mean, it's all because I went to Lewis and Clark and went to Hungary for 6 months and suffered through bread and cheese every day and
lost your money.
Yeah. Did all of that. and somehow I went to the right person at the right time. And then somehow you went to the right person at the right time. Yeah. And it all just kind of happened. The universe wanted us to meet.
And here we are.
And here we are.
We're going now.
Okay.